I will teach you how to play the Nimzo Indian defense, and this is an amazing opening you can play as black, and this works when your opponent tries to play the Queen's Gambit opening. And I will explain the exact way that I have used this opening and also how I teach it to my coaching students. So the entire thing we need to remember here is when white plays pawn to d4, their biggest goal is to also get this pawn to e4. If they can achieve that, that's usually quite good for white. So all we are doing is making that impossible. So that is why we start with the knight here, so that we can prevent them from pushing that pawn. They play c4, we play pawn to e6, so that we can open up our bishop, and then when they play knight to c3, which is the most common move because this helps them to play the e4 push, we can now pin this knight. Because every single move you need to double check. Can white play pawn to e4? Here, if we don't do anything, then yes, white would be able to play pawn to e4. So we need to prevent that. And we can prevent that here by playing bishop to b5. And this pins the knight, and by pinning the knight, we remove it as a defender from this square, and that makes e4 impossible. There is, of course, a lot of different things that white can play, but as black, we always try to do the same thing, because we want to play this, at least I suggest to play this with minimal theory memorization. Just trying to understand the opening is more than enough. So they play queen to c2. This helps them to push pawn to e4, because if we don't do anything right now, for example, let's say that we castle, they just have to move pawn to e4, and if we take the knight, they will take back with the pawn, so that the queen is still keeping an eye on it. So basically here, if we just castle, we would be giving them pawn to e4, and that is of course not what we want. We want to prevent that. So I will be playing pawn to d5, because this also stops the e4 push. So basically every single move you can just find them by having a look at whether or not your opponent can play e4. If they attack your bishop, usually I just trade it. There are some variations where you can also go back if you really want to, but here we are just going to eliminate the knight, because that was also a piece that is supporting the e4 pawn push. Here I think we've now come to a moment where white cannot play e4. If they play this, we would just be winning a pawn. So that means it is time for us to castle and to see what they are doing. And oftentimes in this opening, what white is going to do is they are going to play bishop to d3. Why? Well, bishop to d3 also helps with the e4 pawn push, and then they might be pushing it eventually. So we want to make that impossible, and that is why very often you play the move pawn to b6 here. Pawn to b6, because this allows us to either play bishop to b7, also aiming at the e4 square, or sometimes also bishop to a6, which is very interesting, because now we are attacking this pawn twice, and if they take, we would be able to take their bishop and basically destroy their castling rights. So here white didn't play bishop to d3. I'm going to actually show you. If they had played bishop to d3, I would just play bishop to a6, so that we are protecting this e4 square once more. And what you can sometimes also do is first distract their bishop and then play bishop to b7 to attack that square and also attack the pawn on g2. There's not really one variation that's much better than the others. It's a bit depending on your playstyle, I think. You have to pick between those moves. Here we will have a slightly different variation, because white has not yet taken our pawn. That was possible on the previous move. Like white could have taken and then maybe try to play like bishop to d3 to prevent this, and then we can play bishop to b7. So that is just a couple of lines here. But now we have a very particular line, as I said, where we can play bishop to a6. And I just wanted to say that don't think that this is super common. The more common way is to play bishop to b7. But here I can, because their pawn was still on c4, actually play this, which leads us to capturing their bishop. They lose the castling rights, and then we can just recapture here, still making sure it is not immediately possible for them to play pawn to e4. So we are definitely going to have an interesting game, because white already lost the castling rights here. At some point you are going, of course, to be done with the opening, and you will be getting into a middle game we are in the middle game here, and for the middle game, I always have the exact same strategy. You want to focus on developing your pieces, which basically means look at your pieces on the back rank, move them to a different square so they are more active. So that is what I am doing here. White plays pawn to c4 for the second time, which can happen if you take that at knight. Sometimes you give them an extra c-pawn. That is okay. There are a couple of things we could think about here. You could take this. They probably will take with the knight, and still this pawn push to e4 is not possible, so that is okay. Oftentimes you can also counterattack with pawn to c5. And then a lot of things can happen, like if they take here, we take with the queen. This knight is a little bit, how should I say it? It's not that well protected, right? Because the pawn might be disappearing, and then the knight might also disappear. And if they take this, they just lose a knight. So those are again two potential plans I think you could have here. Either taking on c4 or playing c5. I'm going to go for the c5 pawn push. And that is also something to remember for all of your middle games. As I said, you want to focus on developing your pieces and mostly using your e-pawn, d-pawn, and c-pawn. So here we still had the c-pawn left, so we definitely needed to get it into the game as well. Okay. And I think here we are now going to get into a position with a couple of trades probably. Again, there are many different moves possible, but I will be trading here because I don't really want to end up with an isolated queen's pawn in any of those positions. I would rather have this pawn structure at the very end with 3 pawns on the king side, 2 pawns on the queen side. So we will also be trading this one. I'm looking for a move here. What could we potentially play? I was thinking maybe knight to d7 might be a move, activating an extra piece. Maybe queen to c7 might also be a move, because we are putting some pressure on the knight. We are also threatening to simply win this pawn. They cannot take, otherwise they drop the queen. So I think this might actually be a very interesting move as well, queen c7. Here they played queen to c3. Okay. It looks like they are setting up a little bit of a battery against this pawn. The queen and bishop are working together. So we do definitely need to make sure that we don't end up blundering anything here. Because I think, for example, if I capture, I'm not exactly sure if this is ever going to lead to any trouble. There might be pressure in that position. So let us see. I think knight to d7 is probably also still a good move. But again, I have to watch out, because if they take, we would be doubling our own pawns, maybe even losing a pawn. So that's also not what we want. So we have to be careful. I think this battery with the queen and bishop is quite annoying. I think we have to play knight here to attack it and just to see what move they make. By the way, knight on e4 is also a very common plan here. Because sometimes there is no way to stop e4 except by just putting one of your knights in there. So that's something to remember. Okay, and I think now we just take this free pawn because they cannot recapture. Otherwise, they would be losing the knight. So I think so far everything is going great here with the opening. We are basically up a pawn. That's all we need. We are going to see if we can trade into the endgame. But I do have to make sure that I keep the free pawn. I cannot just allow them to win it back. So I think knight to d7 might be a move, but again, as I just said, I need to be careful that I don't just end up dropping the pawn. Although I do think there might be some counterplay, but if not necessary, I won't drop the pawn. So let's just protect it first. Okay, and let's see what they play. Queen b4. Yeah, by the way, I'm already completely in a position I by now don't really know exactly what to do anymore. But I think it shouldn't be too difficult. I think all we really need to do is to try to hold on to the extra pawn, basically. I think if we can just do that, just hold on to the extra pawn. I'm actually going to connect my pawns like this. It's going to be fine. And now I think we just need to find a way to get this knight into the game, connect the rooks, and it's going to be a pawn up endgame. But I don't want to lose this. I think I will play knight to f5 here. Knight to f5, we attack the bishop, we protect the pawn, basically solves all of the problems. Yes, they can attack our queen once. doesn't really do anything. I think we can just keep building up some pressure. And I think finally we can develop the knight. The question is c6 or d7. I think usually d7 is the move, but we got ourselves into a position where I think c6 also works. Okay, and they play e4 attacking the knight. But I think we might just have a couple of trades here because this bishop is also hanging. So if I take the bishop, if they take my knight, I take their knight, they take with the queen, and we just trade, and we are up a pawn. So that looks perfectly fine. And of course, if they capture this, I think we can just take that with the queen, take, take. We win a pawn. We don't get back rank mated because we have a rook there as well. So this is looking to me like it's going to be a huge trade, and at the end of the trade, we win a second pawn. So now we have a 2-pawn advantage. And I always say all you really need in chess is a 1-pawn advantage most of the time. Sometimes that can lead to draw, so a 2-pawn advantage is nice. So that is exactly what we achieved. You can see we have 3 versus 3 on the king side, and I have a 3 versus 1 on the queen side. So definitely the queen side is where we want to play. We want to start and get these pawns moving. We want to get the pawns to move. Because once we do get them to move, we will also be able to promote. So now I have connected passed pawns. I'm just looking to see, I think I do have to watch out a little bit. I think I can just push. They can come in here. I think I can push. They can take. It looks like they might have something, but we actually make a queen right before they can really do anything. Okay, my opponent is being sneaky. I hope all of you see this. If I push, that's a very basic back rank mate that they are setting up. Maybe it's time to make a little bit of air for the king so we don't get back rank mated. Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, sure, doesn't matter. We have literally 2 pawns connected, both supported by the rook. Nothing can go wrong here. This should be an easy endgame. I'm even going to sacrifice that pawn. They can take it. I'm going to show you that variation. They can take it, I push, and they cannot protect the promotion. So I think that is why they are not doing it. But it doesn't matter at this point. I think whatever we play, this should be easy. Yeah, let's just take that with the king. Okay, and let's make a queen. And this endgame is always super easy. You can either try to trade the rooks or you can try to win a rook, which can usually be done by giving a couple of checks. I think here probably there will be a checkmate at some point, or we might be able to pick up the rook. Like here we can definitely pick up the rook. And then this will be a checkmate, which I don't need to show. It's a very easy checkmate from this point. So I would say please try this opening for black and let me know in the comments how it went.